Just yesterday, Secretary of State Colin Powell made a surprising admission. He told the Washington Post that he doesn't know whether he would have recommended the invasion of Iraq if he'd been told at the time that there were no stockpiles of banned weapons. Powell said when he made the case for war before the United Nations 1 year ago, he used evidence that reflected the best judgments of the intelligence agencies. But according to the people you're about to meet, long before the war, there was plenty of doubt among intelligence analysts about Saddam's weapons. One analyst, Greg Thielman, told us last fall that key evidence cited by the administration was misrepresented to the public. Thielman should know he'd been in charge of analyzing the Iraqi weapons threat for Powell's own intelligence bureau. When you saw Secretary of State Powell make his presentation to the United Nations, what did you think?
I had a couple of initial reactions, then I had a more mature reaction. I think my conclusion now is that it's probably one of the low points in his long and distinguished service to the nation.
At the end of the speech, the United Nations and the American people had been misinformed, in your opinion.
I think so.
Greg Thielman was a Foreign Service officer for 25 years. His last job at the State Department was acting director of the Office of Strategic Proliferation and Military Affairs, responsible for analyzing the Iraqi weapons threat. You and your staff had the highest security clearances.
That's right.
And you saw virtually everything.
That's right.
Whether it came into the CIA or the Defense Department, it all came through your office sooner or later.
Yes.
Thielman was admired at State. One high-ranking official called him honorable, knowledgeable, very experienced. Thielman took a long-planned retirement 4 months before Powell's big moment at the UN. February 5th, 2003 was the day that the world had been waiting for. Secretary Powell presented the evidence against Saddam.
The gravity of this moment is matched by the gravity of the threat that Iraq's weapons of mass destruction pose to the world.
Do you believe that Iraq posed an imminent threat to the United States of America at the point we went to war?
No. I think it didn't even constitute an imminent threat to its neighbors at the time he went to war.
Thielman says that's what the intelligence really showed. For example, he points to the evidence behind Powell's charge that Iraq was importing these aluminum tubes to use in a program to build nuclear weapons.
Saddam Hussein is determined to get his hands on a nuclear bomb. He is so determined that he has made repeated covert attempts to acquire high-specification aluminum tubes from 11 different countries, even after inspections resumed.
This is one of the most disturbing parts of Secretary Powell's speech for us.
The tubes were intercepted by intelligence agents in 2001. The CIA said that they were parts for a centrifuge to enrich uranium, fuel for an atom bomb. But Thielman wasn't so sure. Experts at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, the scientists who enriched uranium for American bombs, advised that the tubes were all wrong for a bomb program. At about the same time, Thielman's office was working on another explanation. It turned out the tube's dimensions perfectly matched an Iraqi conventional rocket.
The aluminum was exactly, I think, what the Iraqis wanted for artillery.
And you sent that word up to the Secretary of State many months before.
That's right.
We'll see where it intersects. This is the velocity.
Houston Wood was a consultant who worked on the Oak Ridge analysis of the tubes. He watched Powell's speech too. When you saw the presentation in full with regard to the aluminum tubes, what were you thinking?
I guess I was angry. I think that's probably the best emotion, best way to describe my emotions. I was angry at that.
Wood is among the world's authorities on uranium enrichment by centrifuge. He found that the tubes couldn't be what the CIA thought they were. They were too heavy, 3 times too thick, and certain to leak.
Wasn't going to work. No, they would have failed.
Wood reached that conclusion back in 2001. Thielman reported to Secretary Powell's office that he was confident the tubes were not for a nuclear program. Then, about a year later, when the administration was building a case for war, the tubes were resurrected on the front page of the New York Times.
I thought when I read that there must be some other tubes that people were talking about. I just was flabbergasted that people were still pushing that those might be centrifuges.
The New York Times reported that senior administration officials insisted the tubes were for an atom bomb program. Was it clear to you that science wasn't pushing this forward?
Yes, that's a very good way to put it. Science was not pushing this forward. Scientists had made their evaluation, had made their determination, and now we didn't know what was happening.
In his UN speech, Secretary Powell acknowledged there was disagreement about the tubes, but he said most experts agreed with the nuclear theory.
There is controversy about what these tubes are for. Most U.S. experts think they are intended to serve as rotors in centrifuges used to enrich uranium.
Most experts are located in Oak Ridge, and that was not the position there.
Do you know one in academia, in government, in a foreign country, who disagrees with your appraisal, who says, yes, these are for nuclear weapons?
I don't know a single one anywhere.
If the Secretary took the information that his own intelligence bureau had developed and turned it on its head, which is what you're saying, to what end?
I can only assume that he was doing it to loyally support the President of the United States and build the strongest possible case for arguing that there was no alternative to the use of military force.
That was the case the President himself was making in his State of the Union address only 8 days before Secretary Powell's speech.
The British government has learned that Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa. Our intelligence sources tell us that he has attempted to purchase high-strength aluminum tubes suitable for nuclear weapons production.
After the war, the White House said the African uranium claim was false and shouldn't have been in the President's address. But at the time, it was part of a campaign that painted the intelligence as irrefutable.
There is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction. There is no doubt that he is amassing them to use against our friends, against our allies, and against us.
My colleagues, every statement I make today is backed up by sources, solid sources. These are not assertions. What we're giving you are facts and conclusions based on solid intelligence.
Solid intelligence, Powell said, that proves Saddam had amassed chemical and biological weapons.
Our conservative estimate is that Iraq today has a stockpile of between 100 and 500 tons of chemical weapons agent.
And part of that stockpile, he said, was clearly in these bunkers.
The 4 that are in red squares represent active chemical munitions bunkers. How do I know that? How can I say that? Let me give you a closer look.
Up close, Powell said, you could see a truck used for cleaning up chemical spills. A signature, he called it, for a chemical bunker.
It's a decontamination vehicle in case something goes wrong.
My understanding is that these particular vehicles were simply fire trucks that you cannot really describe as being a unique signature.
Satellite photos were notoriously misleading, according to Steve Allenson. He was a UN inspector in Iraq in the months leading up to the war. Was there ever a time, in your experience, that American satellite intelligence provided you with something that was truly useful?
No. No, not to me. Not on inspections that I participated in.
Not once?
No.
Ever?
No.
Allenson had been sent to find decontamination vehicles that turned out to be fire trucks, and another time, a satellite spotted what they thought were trucks used for moving biological weapons.
We were told that we were going to the site to look for refrigerated trucks, specifically linked to biological agents.
And you found the trucks?
We did. We found about 7 or 8 of them, I think, in total, and they had cobwebs in them. Some samples were taken and nothing was found.
If Allenson doubted the satellite evidence, Thielman watched with worry as Secretary Powell told the Security Council that human intelligence provided conclusive proof. Thielman says that many of the human sources were defectors who came forward with an axe to grind. Give me some sense of how reliable the defector information was across the board. You got bad information, what, rarely?
I guess I would say frequently we got bad information.
Some of it came from defectors supplied by the Iraqi National Congress, the leading exile group headed by Ahmed Chalabi.
You had the Iraqi National Congress with a clear motive for presenting the worst possible picture of what was happening in Iraq to the American government.
There was a good deal more in Secretary Powell's speech that bothered the analysts. For example, Powell claimed that Saddam still had a few dozen Scud missiles.
I wondered what he was talking about. We did not have evidence that the Iraqis had those missiles, pure and simple.
Last week, David Kay, the former chief U.S. arms inspector, said his team found no stockpiles of banned weapons. His assessment of 12 years of U.S. intelligence was this.
Let me begin by saying we were almost all wrong, and I certainly include myself here, that my view was that the best evidence that I had seen was that Iraq indeed had weapons of mass destruction.
Secretary Powell declined an interview for this broadcast. As we mentioned earlier, Powell told the Washington Post this week that he doesn't know if he would have recommended invasion if he had known then that there were no stockpiles of weapons. But yesterday, he added this.
The bottom line is this. The President made the right decision. He made the right decision based on the history of this regime, the intention that this leader, terrible despotic leader, had, and the capabilities at a variety of levels, the delivery systems that were there, and there's nobody debating that, the infrastructure that was there, the technical know-how that was there. The only thing we're debating is the stockpile.
Tomorrow marks 1 year since Secretary Powell's UN speech. In that time, Greg Thielman has come to his own conclusion about the presentation. He believes that the decision to go to war was made, and the intelligence was interpreted to fit that conclusion.
There's plenty of blame to go around, but the main problem was that the senior administration officials have what I've called faith-based intelligence. They knew what they wanted the intelligence to show. They were really blind and deaf to any kind of countervailing information the intelligence community would produce. So I would assign some blame to the intelligence community and most of the blame to senior administration officials.
This week, President Bush said an independent commission will investigate the intelligence failures on Iraq.